Hi friends, it's Tim Villegas from the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education, and you've hit play on Chapter 5 of Inclusion Stories, our 5-part podcast series that tells the stories of families, educators, and school systems on their journey to full and authentic inclusive education for each and every learner. If you haven't heard the other 4 chapters, please do. Of course, you're going to do what you want, which is totally fine. I just want to make sure you get the context of this chapter because, frankly, there is going to be a lot of me in this one. When I started this podcast series, I had it in my mind that I was going to show the world what a truly inclusive school was. I had very specific ideas of data points and practices that must be present in order for a school to own this distinction. And what I've come to realize is that much like many things in life, it is not as clear-cut and straightforward as we all would like it to be. To start us off, I need to take you back in time. Here, step into my time machine. I know, it's bigger on the inside. Okay. Are you ready? So back around 2011, and mind you, I was still a fairly new Southerner. We had just moved to the Atlanta metro area in 2008. I was a teacher in a segregated special education classroom for students with severe and profound intellectual disabilities. Yeah, I don't like the name either, but that is what it was called. I was already getting the reputation of being the inclusion guy around my district. So when the Georgia Department of Education wanted to run a pilot inclusion program for students with intellectual disabilities, I was asked if I wanted to participate. And of course I said yes. I mean, this was huge. Imagine the implications if this program was successful. A consultant was brought in to work with me during the pilot, and as we were figuring out which one of my students would be a good fit for the program, we settled on Damian, a boy with multiple disabilities who loved being with his peers. One of the first memories I have of working with Damian's family was being on the phone with his mom and her imploring me that she didn't want her son to be left behind or forgotten about. And so I made it my mission to make sure that Damian was given access to everything that every other student had access to. Our journey started in first grade. And guess what happened? It was successful. Even more successful than I thought it would be. Not a surprise if you've been paying attention throughout this series. I just want to pause here to say that Damian's inclusion was really only possible because he had a paraprofessional with him the entire time. And I think that's the only way the school or district allowed it to happen, because he had this level of support. Now, did he actually need it? Yes. But an unintended consequence of this success was that now it was messaged to the school and the district that inclusion really just meant a paraprofessional implementing supports. That's not inclusion. But at the time, I thought it was. And so did a lot of other people. In 2011, our team went to the TASH conference in Atlanta to present on the inclusion pilot. It was a proud moment. But as I look back on this experience, I realized that what we did was just for Damian. And while it benefited him and all the students and staff that knew him, did it change the system that segregated him to my classroom in the first place? I mean, this was the point of the whole exercise. If it were up to my principal or district administrators, teachers would have to opt in to inclusive classrooms and make sure everyone is happy, including the families, before we did anything like this again. These are the conversations we were having. Inclusion, only if you want it. But for Damian, we continued. He was included for a larger portion of his day each year in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And by the time he was in 5th, he was included for over 80% of his day in general education. Overall, inclusion for him was successful because we planned for it, and he got the support that we planned for. At the end of the 2014-2015 school year, as he was headed to middle school, Damian received the Citizenship Award. Let's listen in.
Here as a Kincaid, Damian has exceeded expectations, including myself, and mine are pretty high. One of the first conversations I had with Damian's parents was about their concern that he would get stuck because of low expectations. And the tendency for people not to push Damian because they didn't know what he was capable of. With such strong advocates as parents, they are just as responsible for Damian's success as he is. We started including Damian in general education in first grade for a portion of the day, and each subsequent year we're more successful and increased the time. This year he spent most of the day in Mrs. McAlpin's fifth grade class, and we're happy to report that he has been a full participant in that classroom community. But also more importantly, he has been a full citizen here at Kincaid Elementary School. This success follows him to Simpson Middle School, where he is slated to attend general education segments throughout his day to ensure that he continues not to get stuck. So with that in mind, it's my greatest pleasure to award Damian Boyd Jr. the Citizenship Award.
One of the teachers that Damian had was so inspired after having him in her classroom, she decided to leave the general education classroom and work in a segregated, self-contained classroom for students with intellectual disabilities. Certainly not the outcome that I would have wanted. As the school team was planning for Damian's transition to middle school, the special education director told me that, guess what? Damian was reassessed and he isn't in the severe and profound intellectual disability range. He was in the moderate intellectual disability range. So isn't it great? Now that we know where he belongs, he can go to a lesser restrictive environment. And of course, the middle school just didn't know what to do with including him because they've never done it. And it seemed like his teacher was just going through the motions. In fact, I know of school staff that called the whole thing a joke and inappropriate, not the outcome I would have hoped for. As we head back into the present, I've been wondering if all the work we did with Damian was worth it. So I reached out to Damian's family. And one chilly fall morning, we met in their living room.
Hey,
what's up, Damian?
Come on in. It wasn't hard to find, was it?
No.
You've been here before.
I remember. Kind of. I was like, this looks familiar. It's good to see you, man. Good to see you, too.
He's right here. We literally just finished breakfast.
Oh, okay, great.
Damian, you say hi to Mr. Tim?
What's up, Damian? Damian. Hi. Hi. Did you just have breakfast? Damian, how old are you now?
How old are you? 19.
19 years old.
19.
And you're a senior.
You're
right?
a senior, yes? Say yes.
Oh my gosh. So you're 19, you're a senior. Something that I've come to understand a little bit better and like where I've grown to as far as my thinking about inclusion. You know, when we first started including Damian, I thought that, well, if we could get Damian included in first grade and then second and then fourth, third, fourth, and when he was, by the time he was in fifth grade, he was in for a majority of the day. I was thinking, if people see this and people see the success, it'll spread through the school. And I think for the most part, people did see it as successful. There were definitely people that didn't. But what I think I missed is that the principal needed to be the one to lead the work in this, not a special ed teacher in Pod A.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because no matter how successful we were, I was still seen as that teacher in Pod A. You know?
I think you were seen as more than that.
Well, okay.
For the record, you were seen as an innovator, but innovation isn't always easy.
Yeah.
And I think you have a point. If you're not bought in, if the whole school's not bought in, then it's short-lived. Now, once again, I think there was a great benefit to the kids who experienced it.
Absolutely.
And I think you know what I also noticed? I noticed that teachers that were the mainstream class teachers, they grew too.
Yes.
I watched them develop, and I watched them go from, I'm frustrated by this, to, ooh, I have a good idea. Or maybe we can figure this out. Or I think this would be a good thing to do with Damian. So I think what I enjoyed is when the lights went on with those teachers. And they started to think about him as easily as they thought about the other kids. And it was always a journey. It was like in August, they're frustrated. In September, they're quizzical. They're wondering. By October, they're excited. And by the end of the year, he was one of their favorite students, and they were like, I'm going to miss him.
Oh, my God.
There was one teacher, I remember, it was a science class that he was in. And she was trying to figure out, she was totally frustrated. She was trying to figure out how to engage Damian. And, we bring him over, and we had to go in and show, hey, his world is within about 2 feet of his chair. That's all of his world. Oh, so I have to bring him in closer. Yes. And then brought him in closer, and they're talking about earth science, I remember. And, she's talking about something, and Damian says, soil erosion. And she went, yes, soil erosion. She didn't realize that he was learning, and he was listening the entire time. And he knew the answer. He knew it. And she knew that he knew it. And when she said yes, he cracked up laughing, and the whole class got it. But once again, she had to understand, I can't just look at the surface. He has more going on. And if I give him the information, it's not up to me to make sure he has it. It's just I need to let me know that he captured it. And it really made a difference for, like I said, not only him, but other people in the class, because she didn't know that was something he absolutely knew. But that's how it works. But if you don't have a bought-in principle, then you may change. You don't change the generations of students coming through. You change a class or two. It's smaller impact.
Yeah.
It's still impact, but it's smaller.
I've been thinking a lot about impact. What will the impact of this podcast series be? Who in a school district do we need to focus on to increase the leverage to move inclusive practices forward? And what impact can a single teacher have in a system that isn't inclusive? Now, I've promised you some updates on our friends, Sevi, Harper, and Natalia. And don't worry, we are going to get to them. But before we say hi to them, I want you to meet a former colleague of mine that knows a thing or two about trying to change a system from within.
My name is Shari McCrary, and I am a former supervisor for students with disabilities in a school system. And I worked with students of intellectual disabilities, autism, behavior disorder.
Shari and I know each other professionally. And Shari, I think you knew that inclusion was important to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've always known that.
Yeah. And you've also known that I tried wherever I was my best to change hearts and minds, practices toward inclusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think was the barrier?
I go back to this story. When I was teaching in middle school, of course, self-contained, and we started a Friends program.
Yeah.
In the back of my head, a Friends program doesn't do it. That's not inclusion, right? But it was the best I could do at that school with that administration, with that staff. Now, I will say by the end of the year, teachers were coming in and talking to the kids, but that was, the term reverse inclusion, basically.
Right.
We were making cookies and, selling them in the school, but the students were never invited to go into the gen ed classroom. It was like it was okay as long as they were, here, and I'll come see them, which brings me to another barrier that I feel like is true in life. I feel like a lot of the teachers don't feel prepared to work with students with disability.
Yeah, I don't think educators in general are like purposefully trying to, separate or segregate students or treat students any differently.
Right.
It's just if you're not used to being around people who have a certain profile, are autistic or, have an intellectual disability, or if you're not used to it, you don't know how to act. You
Right.
don't know.
I've also had experience where a teacher has said to me, I'm not sure how the other students will accept them in the classroom. And she didn't know how to handle that. Which is a valid thing, but that's also teaching the other students in the class about disabilities, and everybody's different.
Don't you think that's why, though, like it should be coming, like it's great when teachers and like general ed and special ed teachers come together and make something work, right? It's great. But that's not sustainable,
No.
right?
Right.
So it really needs to come from the top. It needs to come at least from the principal.
Absolutely. What has always stuck out in my head is my principal came in to my self-contained high school classroom, severe profound, housed in a trailer at an elementary school. But she walked in and I did a lesson on, I can't even remember what it was, geometric shapes or something. And the students all had their devices. They were answering questions. And she looked at me and said, you always told me they could learn, but now I see it. Like,
Yeah.
but she still didn't let me take those students out into gen ed. I think as a culture, we need to help teachers explore their own beliefs, right? Because I don't think they've really thought about it. Don't have time. They've got pressure from the state to get these standards taught and all that. But what are their true beliefs?
Yeah.
And if they recognize that, that would be a starting point for somebody to help them, in their classroom and stuff.
Most people don't go into special education without a reason,
Right, right.
Like,
Well, I can tell you my reason.
yeah, please.
Right out of high school. No, I was a senior in high school, and I started volunteering. Okay, it's going to make me tear up. Started volunteering with students with disabilities in the basement of a church. And every time I would go there, I would think, why are they in the basement? Why are they downstairs in a basement? It got to me. And I mean, from day one of college at the University of Alabama, I was in special ed. I was going to be a special ed teacher and make a difference. Right? tried, got there, got a teaching degree, got my, master's, my specialist, and my doctorate. But it's hard to make a change in a system that's not there yet in their thinking, right? So I was like you. I tried to do small things within each building I was in, to make a difference. But, that's why I started. Why are these children in the basement of a church?
As I wrapped up with Shari, I just had one more question. What do you tell teachers who are stuck in a system that is not inclusive?
It may not be in your time, but what about that next teacher and that next teacher, right? And that next student, the opportunity. So you're always fighting for that student to have that opportunity. So you can't give up. You don't give up. You and I didn't give up. We didn't leave the system because we didn't have full inclusion, right? So what you do is you start getting the students out as much as possible, anywhere possible. If it's PE, if it's art, if it's start there. But more importantly, start having open, honest conversations with the staff at your school.
After a short break, we'll catch up with the families of Sevi, Harper, and Natalia. Kristen, Sevi, what's up? What's going on?
Good.
You doing good?
Yeah.
We are enjoying our last day of summer. School starts tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my kids started August 1st.
Oh no, already?
Yeah.
That's the earliest I've heard. Wow.
Yeah, it's a Georgia thing. So it's August, and we saw each other in January,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
right?
In
So
person.
it's been a few months. And the last time we talked, if I remember correctly, you were still having IEP meetings and trying to figure out what the rest of the school year was going to look like.
Right.
So, what was the outcome for this year? Did it get better? Is it worse? Like, what happened?
Do you want to talk about second semester?
It was really hard.
It was hard.
Yeah.
Why was it hard?
It was hard because there are no supports. They wouldn't let me use the markers for coding. Color coding. They thought I was coding, but I'm not. My markers helped me understand.
So it sounds like they weren't too accommodating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was rough. We saw some growth, which I think in any freshman, who's starting over in a whole new situation, especially someone like Sevi who has so many moving parts to his program. He changed school, he changed all his teachers, he changed his aide, he changed every provider except for two who have more of an itinerant role. So he completely started over. So we did see growth from first semester to next semester. If you look at kind of a GPA perspective, if you look at, how did he interact with material? How did he do homework? Kind of his overall affect. I think that improved, but it was rough. We had a lot of meetings, and we had very little movement. So he ended the school year in the current state that we talked about in January, with lack of supports, lack of full implementation of his IEP from my perspective, in terms of services and accommodations. And thankfully, though, for next year, it looks like we're going to have those supports we had been working for in place. And the big question always is, how is the staff going to respond? So we have the framework, but how is that going to be filled in? Because without that collaboration, it's doable, but it's really hard. I mean, it's really, really hard, and it's really stressful on him. It's stressful on me. And it just feels like a constant uphill battle. And I just feel like it doesn't need to be that way.
What do you hope school leaders will learn from your story, Sevi?
I want them to know that I can make friends in all my classes. This makes me feel happy. This makes me act like I belong. Most other kids don't care that I have Down syndrome, but some do. I work hard, and if I have support, I can do it. Everyone should have a chance to belong.
If you had a school staff that already knew and felt, and it was a priority that Sevi felt like he belonged in the school, then a lot of this just wouldn't even it wouldn't be a fight, right?
Right. And really you need one person. It doesn't seem like enough, but it is. You just need one. And I'm just really struggling to find that one. And I don't know if it's just because it's high school, because face it, in high school, the focus is on the kids becoming adults and self-advocating and doing all these things for themselves and taking ownership, like they're becoming adults and being able to go off to the next step of their life and not need their parents to do all these things for them. Well, that's what I want for Sevi. So why wouldn't we be doing that same thing for Sevi as we would for everybody else? But when you have a kid like Sevi who is not yet able to do all of those things for himself and needs someone to help him represent his viewpoint and his voice and his mindset, or still needs that to be done for him, right? Because he's not there yet, then why are we shutting that down? Like they're not used to parents being there. They're not really used to engaging with parents in that way at a high school level. And so some of it, I think, is just the dynamic of high school. But there's also a mindset, in my area that is very different than the alignment with the vision that we have for my son. And that's been hard. That's been hard because we will not budge from that. I am a firm believer that there is nobody in this world that has the right to change my mindset for my son other than my son. That's it. He's the only one who gets to tell me, you're wrong about that. Instead, we're doing this, right? Yeah. And so I will not budge. And I'm happy to engage in conversation to figure out how we can build capacity. And I understand it's a process, and I understand there's lots of many steps, and I understand there's a lot of perceived barriers. But if we can't engage in collaborative discussion, it's really hard to have any kind of movement.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with me. So, Justin and Christina, why don't you just fill me in on kind of how did the end of the last school year go for Harper and the family?
I mean, it went really well. She had a very good team in place. There's always little hiccups here and there, but for the most part, communication from the school was great. One of her teachers has her PhD and tons of specialized reading instruction, including special education and general education. And she has since left the county, which is unfortunate, but she did do a summer camp over the summer called Camp Learn a Lot. And Harper took her first test in science on the phases of the moon. And that was something that the teacher front loaded during the summer. And so she made an 80% on it, which was great, because she already kind of knew the content. So it was really neat. It was neat to see her independently take a test and succeed. an 80 is not great for some people, but I think it's amazing. So
That is amazing. Yeah, that's
yeah,
really cool.
for sure.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it went great. I mean, her team's great. This year she got to keep her same communication para, which was amazing. Of course, I write letters at the end of the year to everybody, telling her how amazing she's doing with the para and the support team she has. Please don't take it. And then please don't change people. I'll die.
She made so much progress in school and was just, she's, always excited to go to school and just be with her friends. And the teachers and the team she had last year really, really pushed her, but in a good way. She really grew a lot, and it's exciting to see. And then they kind of continued it with her camps over the summer. We're really proud of the work she does. I mean, I could promise there's no one that works harder at that school than Harper Berry. So it's really cool to see. And she used to be really bad at transitioning, but even just with the new school year, with the new teachers, for even some parts of the team are the same, but obviously a lot changes when you move up to a grade level. She's done really well and continues to do well. So we're excited with the progress she continues to make, that we know she wouldn't be making it if she was not being included in regular education classes.
And she's a fourth grader now?
Mm-hmm.
Fourth grade, correct.
Fourth grade. Well, it's fresh in my mind because I've re-listened to our conversation, which was like over a year ago. But I think that what I kind of glean from all that is, when you have a really good teacher, you're gonna learn, and where are the best teachers? The best teachers are in general ed. Yeah. Not to say that there aren't really great teachers that teach in special education classrooms.
Well, even for an example, I can tell you, since her inception, I guess, into the school system, she had a very well qualified pre-K teacher, special needs pre-K teacher. But from the start of kindergarten in a unit, the teacher wasn't even certified, no specialized reading instruction. Same thing with the next year and the next year, until we fully pulled her out of the unit. And now the difference is 3 of them have had PhDs. They've all had specialized reading instruction. And that's just sad, but that's the fact in our county. So the amount of progress she made in the last year and a half. So she went from, I guess it was the end of last year, not last year, but the previous year, that I pulled her completely from the unit, which was the last segment of the day she was in there was math. And she was barely recognizing her numbers past 10 and whatever. And she went within a year and a half of that, double digit adding and subtracting with proper supports. And it's sad because there are kids sitting in that classroom right now. Not that the teacher's not lovely, because she is very nice. She just doesn't have the qualifications. And, you put kids at most risk for falling behind with the people with the least experience. It makes no sense to me, but not my kid anymore for now.
Yeah. And that's a major problem. It's not just
sure.
Our county, your county problem. Mm-hmm. It's nationwide, and teacher preparation. And when you have inclusive schools have really strong universal tier 1 core instruction. There's a lot of different names for it, but if you have a really strong education core base with any teacher, then it doesn't matter who's in that class. You're going to, there's going to be great teaching practices going on in that class. And that's what I've been learning, through this whole situation. What would you say to an educator, like a teacher or a principal, or maybe somebody in district leadership, that is like, I don't know about this inclusion thing. In theory, it sounds nice, but I just don't know.
I feel like my biggest thing I would probably say is, regardless what your county does or doesn't do or support, you as a teacher have the opportunity to genuinely change a child's life, right? And their trajectory. And doing so, like, for example, with my child, if she wasn't, albeit forced through our involvement in pushing things, if she weren't in this setting, she would not be making any progress. She'd be stuck like a bump on a log and not learning. And that's unfortunate and sad. And the fact that being an educator, knowing you can actually make that type of a difference in a child's life, like, why would you not? Like, even if it's scary and it takes, maybe just take one little step at a time toward it, right? Like, and start one thing at a time, and find out ways to include a child, and look at children, even just a shy child who's sitting there that doesn't socialize in the classroom. Make it easy for all of them to do it. Like, it's not just kids with disabilities; it's including everyone of any exceptionality, right? So, like, you wouldn't segregate a child based on their skin color or their hair color or eye color. Why would you do it based on abilities? Like, it makes no sense to me, yeah, I guess that's, yeah. Give them a chance. There's no reason not to. They deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, their role, right, is to serve the community as a whole. And you're not serving the community to its fullest if you're segregating. Segregation has never, ever proven to be the good thing at all. And so including everybody, like Christina said, no matter what your cognitive levels, skin color, religion, hair color, that should not matter. What should matter is inclusion and learning from people from different backgrounds and different capacities. And so that's why inclusion is a must. I see it all the time just from the random interactions we have in our community with Harper's peers, and just how they love seeing her. And they're Harper. It's amazing how watch other kids light up when they run into her, and how excited they are. They don't shun from her, which would happen probably if she was off in another room in the back of the school, right? With, in a different room, but because she's included and because they know her and understand her,
because it's the norm.
Right.
Like, that's just what normally happens. And so I would also add that, you as educators are building our next leaders, right? You're building these presidents and CEOs and COOs, CFOs, whatever you want to call them. But I guarantee you, none of those people that succeed to that level will have not had to deal with people different than them. I mean, they're going to have to learn how to interact with many different types of people on all different types of levels, not just, just people with special needs or what have you. But it's going to be all kinds of different people. And to be successful in life, those children have to be taught that at a very young age. And unfortunately, sometimes they aren't taught that in their families. And if you can be that changing factor, even for a typically developing child, who you can teach them the empathy that they're failing to get at home by including children with exceptionalities, you've just done that not only them, but our whole community a favor, of building good humans.
Yeah. Oh man. Great stuff. Really appreciate, again, your participation in this, and it's going to be awesome. What's happening with Natalia? You had an IEP. What's going on? What's the latest?
This year was good. I can't complain. It was good. She has 2 good teachers. Not as good as last year's teacher, but they were good.
Got her
But
eligibility.
she's still general
right?
ed. Yes.
But then the placement meeting.
Yeah. So she's the same in a collab for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Eligibility was mild intellectual disability, speech or language impairment, and I don't have the last one, but they added visual impairment too.
Right. Okay.
To the eligibility.
And so then, right now, her services are all in that collab class, right?
Correct. So she's getting pulled out for 1 hour math and 1 hour reading.
Okay. Is that with the special ed teacher that's in the collab class, or is it another special ed teacher?
It's a small group. It's called small group, but it's a special ed teacher in a small group. It's not a special ed classroom because they only have the autism class in there.
Good. So how do you feel about that? You still feel like it's been successful this year?
Yeah, I think she made a lot of progress in other areas. We tend to only see the academic progress because it's what we get in the report. But for me, well, Natalia gets home and I try to do some homework with her, and sometimes she will engage with me, and I see she's like boom, 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 doing everything she's supposed to do. But most days she's like, I don't want to do schoolwork again. Why do I need to do this at home? But I've seen when she wants to work with me, she has made some no amazing progress. So I think that for the general ed teacher, I explained to her, as long as I see that she's making progress, even slow progress, that to me is great because she's growing in so many other areas too that she couldn't have that at the other school or in a special ed setting only.
Yeah, she's learning how to get back in line. Like you're going to the restaurant with a buddy, coming back to the classroom. She's learning to do transition from class to recess to back to class. She's learning. Man, she gets off the car
She's
when
very independent.
I drop her off the car, and her sister doesn't even wait for her, and she just goes to her classroom straight without wandering off.
And she says hi to everybody, good morning.
Yeah, she rides the bus without getting in trouble for the most part.
So how do you think we could bring some more inclusion culture to? What would be a good approach?
I mean, you could. It just depends on how. Like, if you feel like you've got a good thing going with your local school, then in developing relationships with them and good practices for Natalia. But if you want to try to make a bigger impact, then I would talk with the director and be like, hey, look, this is what's happening with Natalia. We're really passionate about this. We'd love to see inclusive practices be more widely adopted. Once this podcast series is done, you can share it with them. I don't know if you have any other families of who have children with Down syndrome or other disabilities that you want to maybe have a little cohort, of advocacy.
I know several families that are actually very close in age with Natalia. Everybody else's approach on this thing is so different.
There is another girl with Down syndrome, and she's in kindergarten. And the parents are very educated. They work at the university here. And I remember when Natalia was in kindergarten, she stopped me one day and she said, I have a daughter with Down syndrome too, and she'll be coming to this school. I hope so one day. And I want to thank you for everything you have done because I know it's hard. So that was, nice to hear. But then this year, I saw her again. She's still in school, and she said, I've heard all the stories about Natalia and how hard it has been for you guys. And we haven't had any issues at this school, but my daughter, she's been in collab. She's included. She has friends, and it's been so easy for us. And I think it's all because of you and Natalia. And I thank you for that. And that to me was all we have to fight. And if it's helping other family, that's great.
It sounds like the thing, you want to make an impact, obviously, like that's your desire, but you definitely are already making an impact. You know, like, so like what you said about the families, the family following in your footsteps. So I think I'd feel really good about that. So,
Well, like you said, Timmy, I think this what we're doing is infectious, and what we're doing in inclusion, people that are smart see that it's a good thing, right?
thanks for sharing that. Well, we're right at our time, but is there anything else that you wanted to share before we close it up?
Well, no, we had, like I said, we had a great year. We're thankful for, all the opportunities we had. It wasn't perfect.
But we made it work.
Right.
And it worked good. Yeah.
It's just making progress, slow progress. It's just doing good.
Awesome. I don't know if you noticed any particular themes in the conversations we've had in this chapter, but I'll throw out some words and see if they resonate. Imperfect, progress, impact, start, mindset, action, practices. And there's one more big one that jumps out at me: hope. I was telling a podcaster friend of mine recently that this whole podcast series has been an experiment in hope. An experiment that, if it does what I hope it does, will move you to action, whatever your context. Okay, before I close this chapter out, I want you to meet some individuals that will help crank that hope meter up to 11.
I'm Kristen Burnett. I'm an assistant professor at East Carolina University. I brought my students to TASH because they saw inclusive practices for the first time this year. And they got to see a county in Maryland, and they had never seen inclusive practices. It's not something that is very accessible in North Carolina. So this was the first time, and we had to go across many states to see it done in action. And we had to write a small grant to get them to be able to go on this trip. And so that was free to them, and this conference is also free to them because of this grant through ECU. It's an internal grant.
Right. And so we are at the TASH conference, and you have a poster presentation,
yes,
right? And so what is on the poster? What are you sharing in the poster?
So their poster presentation is about pre-service teachers' perceptions of inclusive or of a variety of placement settings. Because in North Carolina, the only option for them is to see a self-contained class. So I took them to a self-contained class, and the first thing they did when they got back was they did a little video blog. I took that information, I put it in these quotes, and I found some interesting themes. And one of the things they kept saying was, "Oh, it was pretty good. It was pretty good." And then I took them to Maryland, and they saw inclusive practices, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know this was possible. This is amazing. What are we doing in North Carolina? Why aren't we doing this here?" And just a lot of changing perceptions from what they thought was good to what they know now is the right thing, and that inclusion is a human right for all people. So
awesome. Okay, yeah. And so we have the students here, and so we'll go from left to right.
My name is Madeline Pierce. I am currently a student at East Carolina University, studying special education. So for the trip for me, when I kind of experienced inclusion and what it was after I experienced it, and I kind of decided and brainstormed, it felt a lot like common sense. Like it was something that felt so right, and like what was really needed. It was just supposed to be like the norm. So it was really weird to kind of go in and see how different it was from how I grew up seeing it, and how awesome it was to see all the students and kids collaborating along with the teachers, and how each of them, were we're not quite there yet, or we don't but it was awesome to see that they were putting in effort, and it was something they were really passionate about. And the thing that I said to Dr. Burnett after we were done was I hated her because now I'm still going into schools in North Carolina now, and I'm doing practicums and seeing students in those settings who aren't able to have like inclusion. It's upsetting because you see their potential and how much they could actually benefit from it, and they don't have the opportunity to. So I think it's like a motivator, and it makes me want to be an educator in that way and kind of provide that for them. So that was my standpoint. I just thought it was common sense, basically.
My name is Mackenzie Wittenborn. I'm a student at East Carolina University, also studying special education. Before coming to Maryland and actually seeing inclusion, I knew it was a thing, but I was never able to see it in North Carolina. My mom's a special educator, and it's just it's always been self-contained. They're in their own bubble, in their own island, and it's sometimes it feels like they're not even a part of the school almost because they're so secluded from everybody else. And then coming to Maryland and seeing there wasn't even a separate setting classroom. It was everybody was in the same classroom, receiving the same instruction with slight modifications and supports. And like she said, it feels like it should be common sense. It should be practiced everywhere.
My name is Kinsey Black, and I'm an undergrad student at East Carolina University, also majoring in special education. When I came to Maryland, my initial thought, when I saw these inclusive education practices, I was like, wow, it's such a culture shock because I come from North Carolina, obviously piggybacking off of these two. Everything is so secluded and segregated when it comes to special education, and to be able to come to Maryland and see all of these kids they would be in a secluded setting in North Carolina, to see it in an inclusive setting in Maryland, I'm just this should be implemented everywhere. It shouldn't be taking this long, and there shouldn't be people fighting against it because it clearly works. I want this practice to be implemented across not even just the U.S. but internationally too. It's just, this is so important, and I feel like everybody kind of needs to get on board with these inclusive practices. So yeah.
Hello, I am Natalie Brown, and I am also a student at East Carolina University studying special education adapted curriculum. And as everyone else has been saying, before coming to Maryland, I had never seen inclusion taking place in person. I have always heard the definition of inclusion, what it should look like, but honestly, before taking this class, I feel like now I have a deeper understanding of what inclusion is that I didn't really have an understanding of previously. And so after taking this course and seeing everything in Maryland, I now know that the main roadblock to inclusion is mindset. And I feel like now I'm inspired to change this mindset because students with disabilities deserve to be in the general education classroom. And it's honestly in my quote. I say this every time. It makes me really passionate about inclusion, and I can't wait to implement it in the future school that I will be teaching at. And I can't wait to get started. I feel like now, after seeing this and learning from Dr. Burnett and this experience, I now know where I can start, have an idea of how I can get it going in schools in my county, so I'm really excited.
My name's Cassie Hagler, and I'm a student at East Carolina University, also studying special education. I think the biggest thing for me was that in North Carolina, we never see anything like this. And so I thought inclusion was kids being in a typical classroom for lunch and recess and maybe going into reading class and sitting in the back. That's what I thought before getting to go to Maryland. And then when we got down there and seeing kids in the typical gen ed classrooms, and some of them even on grade level and doing the same materials with their peers, collaborating, it was something that you cannot unsee. And going back home, it's something that you want to go into the classrooms and just get started on right away so that these kids aren't losing these learning opportunities.
Thank you all for your time and your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What I've come to realize in this series, and I hope you have too, is that the big questions that I've been trying to answer, what is an inclusive school or where are the inclusive schools, are really the wrong questions. The right question is, what am I doing to move inclusive education forward in my own context? And you know what? I can point to plenty of examples of imperfect inclusion everywhere and say, that's not inclusion, and that's not inclusion. Frankly, to say something is not inclusion is the easy part. That is not to say we can't offer an alternative, a better way, and a vision forward. That is the hard part, to not only shed light on the imperfections, but lead. I read this quote the other day, and I just can't let it go. It's from a writer / blogger, Anne-Marie Bonneau. And it's about zero waste, but here's the quote. We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. Well, Anne-Marie Bonneau, I'm going to use your quote in our context. We don't need a handful of people doing inclusive education perfectly. We need millions of people doing inclusive education imperfectly. Will you start, even if it's imperfect?
Inclusion Stories is written, edited, sound designed, mixed, and mastered by Tim Villegas.
And it is a production of the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education.
For more information about inclusive education, visit mcie.org. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
A huge shout out to our sponsors. We couldn't have done this project without you. Communication First, Roots of Inclusion, the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, the Thompson Policy Institute on Disability, iSecure Privacy, the White Family, the Teague Family, and to our supporters at the Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, as well as our friends at Club 21 in Pasadena, California. We are grateful for your partnership. Special thanks to Damian, Sevi, Harper, and Natalia, along with all of their families. Thanks to Greg Drews and The Truth for giving us permission to use their song, The Light, from the album Yellow Rose, as our theme. If you loved this series and want another season of inclusion stories, consider donating to MCIE. I'll drop a link in the show notes. We would also appreciate a rating on Spotify and or a review on Apple Podcasts. Or even better, share it with a school administrator. Thanks to all my peeps at the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education, Dr. Carolyn Tieglin, Dr. Carol Quirk, Mary Bernard, Barb Gruber, Kathy Foley, Nolan Taylor, Brittany Sammons, Elizabeth Bloom, and Jeff Wyatt. Thank you to Dr. Shari McCrary for your time and wisdom. Thanks to Dr. Kristen Brunette and her students at East Carolina University in North Carolina. And to all my podcasting pals out there in the world, there are way too many of you to name, but you know who you are. Finally, thanks to my wife Brianna and my kids, Jaden, Isaiah, Imogen, and of course, our pets, Jupiter and Voldemort. Your support on this project has meant the world. Thanks for your time and attention. Hi. Got my microphone. Be scared. Walk fast. Otherwise, you never know what might happen. From MCIE.